Hi, and welcome and thank you for joining us today. Compact Solutions is excited to bring you this webinar focused on maximizing your data catalog investment. During this session, please feel free to submit your questions. If we're unable to answer your questions during the webinar today, we will email a response to your questions within a few days after the webinar. Please remember that you'll be receiving a recording of this webinar after the conclusion of the event. We also want to remind you of our offer to provide a virtual free data lineage assessment. If you are interested, we will provide you with contact information at the end of the webinar on how you can set up your evaluation. Compact Solutions has over 15 years experience in the data management space with a special focus on data lineage and data governance. Our speaker today is David Duda, who is Compact Solutions Vice President of Product Development. David has over 10 years experience in the metadata and data lineage space, and he brings today his knowledge to share with you on how to maximize your data catalog investment. David, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Dan. So today we'll be talking about what we can do to make sure that the investment that we have made in a data catalog solution and data governance space actually pays off, and how do we really get most out of it. How do we ensure that we really deliver the best possible results to our organization? What very often happens is our customers around the world do procure a data catalog product from one of the vendors that provide those solutions, and it can be IBM, Informatica, Calibra, Alation. There's a lot of vendors which provide data catalog solutions in this space. So you buy a data catalog, you go through the initial process of installation, configuration, harvesting some metadata, putting a couple of business terms, and very often there's a question, what do we do now? How do we actually continue using that solution to ensure that we get value out of it rather than just have it up and running with some limited use? How do we make sure that we get most of this investment that we have made in the solution? Today, what I'll be sharing with you is my own observations, being in the space for a while, what we can do to make sure that we maximize the results of the investment that has been made. The first and most important item on this plan is to actually have a plan. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about how to create a strategy, how to create a plan which will let us complete a deployment of a data catalog and then continuously deliver value to the organization. One of the key elements of having a plan is to understand what are the key people that should take part in putting it together. And there is a very important observation that I've made in, unfortunately, several cases with data governance projects failing or being closed. In most of those cases, it was because of lack of engagement from one of the key players in the project. Very often, it is either IT department or the business part of the company not engaging enough in the initiative. If you will have a data catalog implementation or a data governance project in general, which is mostly driven by either IT or business, without paying much attention to the other side of this equation, there is a good chance that it will deliver value only for one side of the company, and therefore will not be picked up and will not be continuously used by the other side as well. It also happens when IT and business try to put the cart in two different directions, and you end up with a solution which doesn't really integrate the two sides of it. However, on top of that, of those two parts, there is also the third one, which is the executive sponsorship. If you do not have executive sponsorship for your project, you may need to reconsider that and making sure that people who are high enough in the organization are fully bought into the project and are supporting that initiative. The reason for that is that while initially things often look as simple and easy and you're just importing your metadata, building business terminology, and doing the basics, sooner or later you will find that you need to engage more and more external teams. And this is the moment when you may need executive support in order to ensure that you will be able to use resources from all over the company rather than just the people that you work with on the daily basis. Now, once we know who are the key players, what we need to do is to identify a plan and build a strategy where we understand, first of all, what is our vision? What do we want to achieve? What are the key goals that we want to deliver? And we need to think of it really as a project, because at the end of the day, it is a project of installing software, configuring, using it to solve particular problems which have to be solved in order to make our organization successful. And it really is not something you can just install, run, and then it will manage itself. No, it will not. If you do not know what do you want to achieve, you will not be able to achieve that. And it is really important to have a roadmap, have a plan of goals that you want to achieve. And no, being agile does not explain why you do not have a roadmap and you do not have goals, because even in the agile world, or actually especially in the agile world, you need to know what do you want to achieve, and then you're using the agile methodology to effectively work towards achieving that. But if you don't know where you're going, it is really difficult to actually get there. Now, while doing that, obviously you need to make sure that both IT and business take part in this plan, that they have their own goals that they want to achieve, that they have their own skin in the game, that there is something that both sides of that story actually want to achieve through the initiative. And then you always need to think about those basic things, which are obvious when we talk about them, but you may be surprised how often in the real life they're not that obvious when it comes to actually delivering data governance. So make sure that the goals that you want to achieve are well defined, that you know how to measure if they have been achieved, who will be doing that, when do you plan to do that. It is something else to say, oh, we'll make some business terms, versus we will say that, let's say, customer service department will define 100 terms in the next 100 days. You know who, you know what, you know how to measure that. And those obvious basics are quite often missed when looking at data governance projects and data catalog implementations. Obviously, you do not want to boil the ocean. You cannot make everything happen overnight. This is a process and this is a project. But if you clearly identify your priorities, you know what do you want to achieve, what are the drivers. This can be either regulatory requirements that you want to satisfy or internal efficiency improvements that you want to achieve by providing various solutions to the company. If you know what you want to do and you have a plan, you will be successful and you will maximize the output of your data governance implementation. So how to do it? What we'll be doing today is we'll be going through one of the ways of building data catalog that actually works and that delivers value. And this is really more like a generic approach that I will be talking about today, which will work for some of you. Some of you may have some very specific, unique requirements that would need to be added to the picture. We'll be more than happy to have individual conversations with you to understand that and help you in doing that. But today we'll talk about the basics, which are really relevant for pretty much anyone who builds a data catalog. The first item that we'll really focus on here is data lineage. And it is really important to understand the importance of data lineage. How funny it sounds, but data lineage is the basis, which really connects all the separate islands of your data systems and of your data flow. If you do not understand how does data flow through your environment, you will not be able to make use of a data catalog and the registry of information that you have, because you will not know how this information is gathered and where does this information go. Most of the usages for having a data catalog is related in one way or another to understanding how does data flow through your systems. Now, you may do that for regulatory reasons. BCBS 239, CCOD, DFAS, there is a lot of regulations that require you to have data lineage. On the other hand, you may be looking at it more from the daily work efficiency perspective and understanding how does data flow through your systems. Regardless of why you do it, at the end of the day, you need to understand how does data flow through your environment. Now, when you're looking at ways of gathering data lineage and gathering information about how does data flow through your environment, there is always a question about how do we do it? Because data lineage, really at the end of the day, can be harvested in one of two ways. You either capture your lineage manually by reading the code, by writing the source to target mappings in one tool or another, and then you maintain this source to target mapping over time. Alternatively, you can extract your lineage automatically by identifying a set of extractors that you would use, procuring them, and then configuring in your environment, set up automated refreshment, set up all the automated processes behind the scene to capture the data lineage of your processes automatically and then maintain it automatically over time. Now, while some people will tell you that one approach will be better than another, the only true answer is that both approaches make sense under certain conditions. There are situations when capturing data lineage manually makes a lot of sense. And those would be when you have a technology that is used in limited scope. When you have, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 scripts in a particular technology, and those really don't change over time. You may not necessarily need super low-level detailed lineage for those, and maybe you can just spend 2 or 3 days putting together source to target mapping for this specific piece of data flow, and it will be pretty much static over time, maybe with some minor changes from time to time. In those cases, really capturing this automatically doesn't make much sense, because probably the cost of either buying or building automated solution for this specific part of your data lineage would be way more expensive than doing it manually, even including the maintenance cost over time. On the other hand, in the same time, you will typically have technologies that you use at scale. And by scale, I mean large scale, so hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of processes. Those will be very often things which are changing on a regular basis, where you need very low-level, granular, detailed lineage about how every single value, every single column, every single transformation is calculated. In those cases, you obviously would spend an enormous amount of time to capture that lineage manually, and the only feasible solution is to find an automated process, an automated solution to capture that lineage. Now, when you look at those two approaches, you could think that it's really like, 0 or 1, either manual or fully automated. This is not really the case. If you're looking at the manual lineage, what we mean by manual is that the capturing or understanding of the flow is not automated. However, there is a lot of other elements of the process which ends up with loading that data lineage into your data catalog that actually can be automated. The story of automatically loading manual lineage is as old as having data catalogs. We actually have several customers that we spend significant time with, helping them to automate as much as possible of loading manually captured data lineage. In many cases, there is existing documentation in form of various Excel spreadsheets and other documents which can be used in order to start building your manual data lineage for those technologies where you don't want to do it automatically. Now, even if you actually need to go through the code and capture the source to target mapping by looking at the transformations and putting it in some sort of a tool, in many cases, validation and import of that lineage can be automated. So even when you're looking at technologies where you are not planning to have a fully automated solution which parses the code and extracts the lineage, you may still benefit from automation, because the process of getting the lineage into the data catalog consists of several steps, and many of them still can be automated. There are solutions that we offer in this space, both on the services side as well as on the product side that can help you with automating as much of this process as it makes sense. Now, going more to the automated side of data lineage capture, obviously you want to make sure that you will have a robust solution that can solve the real life data lineage cases. And what we've seen in a couple of cases is that when you start your data lineage journey and you start looking at your systems, you initially tend to look at the basic simple cases just to understand how this really works and to get your feet wet with capturing data lineage. What sometimes happens is, if you do not fully understand the complexity of some of your more advanced cases for data lineage capture, you may not be aware of all the complexity which is buried under the cover. And there is a risk of picking a simplistic tool which will do some sort of lightweight analysis, lightweight scan, and will give you some basic lineage. And this may work if you only had those basic things. The problem here is that when you will start looking at a wider range of all of your systems, you will realize that the number of patterns, the complexity of those systems, the level of parameterization, metadata-driven frameworks, dynamic CQLs, interconnections between different technologies is so high that your initially selected simplistic solution may not necessarily be the right fit to really cover all of the complexity of a large enterprise. We obviously offer solutions in this space which provide data lineage for non-trivial complex cases, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you individually about this. But my main advice here is to make sure that when you are picking your data lineage harvesting solutions, you make sure that it is not only good enough for the simplistic few cases that you always tackle with at the beginning, but that it is also good enough for the more complex situations, which you may not hit in the first few weeks of your data lineage harvesting exercise, but you will definitely hit 2, 3, 6, 10, 12 months down the road. And then you will realize that, oh, this simple solution may not necessarily work because I actually do those way more complex things in my systems. So this was a couple of advices related to data lineage. Now, data catalog implementation really always has data lineage as one of the most important pieces, but this is not the only important piece in a data catalog. And if you want to efficiently build a data catalog, you need to go beyond. You need to look at your glossary, you need to look at your data lineage, and you also need to look beyond that to really make sure that you cover all the various types of information that should be harvested, that should be centralized in order to provide an effective data catalog implementation for your organization. Now we'll look a bit at various types of metadata with a special focus on different types of it and different ways of gathering it that you would store in your data catalog in addition to data lineage, going beyond just capturing data lineage. One of the key elements that typically comes to your mind when you are thinking about a data catalog is that you need two basic pieces. One basic piece is the data. So you need to know what are your tables, what is your data lineage. The second basic piece is your glossary. And a lot of companies that we work with they ask questions about, so how do I start building my glossary? How do I start putting together the set of terms that I will be using through my data catalog, data governance implementation? Now, what I usually ask as a question in response to that is, what do you have? Because if an organization is working for years or decades and successfully doing business, I mean, otherwise there would be no data catalog implementation, there must be information about how do we understand various terms, how do we understand various concepts in the organization. So what we need to do is to identify where that information is stored and start thinking about how do we bring this information into the data catalog. I cannot imagine an organization that would not have that information already stored somewhere. This can be Excel sheets, which are maintained by several departments. This can be Word documents, internal wiki pages. The technologies of storing this can be very diverse, but at the end of the day, very rarely there is no information that you could actually use. What I typically recommend is to identify these places where you have the glossary information, where you maintain and store it, and start by importing them into your central data catalog and reconciling and harmonizing them in the catalog tool by using all the technologies or the workflows, approvals, whatever processes you're using in your data catalog to merge them, to enhance them, and to build your central data catalog that you would be using, central glossary, excuse me, that you would be using in your data catalog. Now, obviously, there is always an option to buy an industry standard glossary that very often comes with a data model for a particular warehousing solution. Now, those can be very useful. In the same time, they are typically fairly complex to describe in a generic way all the variety of concepts which are used across all organizations in a given industry. And relying purely on an industry glossary to use it as your basic glossary can be a bit challenging because of that complexity. Some of my customers that have been going down that road were quite successful by using those glossaries, but in the same time maintaining a smaller glossary that have been internally developed and then linked to the industry standard glossary. So this is something you may want to consider if you want to expand your glossary to still maintain your internal glossary that would be smaller, more self-contained, and then using the industry standard terms as an additional information that you would be linking to. Another aspect going beyond glossary is the variety of information that you may want to capture about your data. Typically, when thinking of a data catalog, you would think, okay, there is a database table and it's in a particular schema. There are some columns, maybe data type information, and now I'll be doing lineage and glossary. Well, the information that you can capture in your data catalog can go well beyond just the fact that a table exists. The most successful data catalog implementations are really underpinned by very detailed data analysis. You may want to look at your profiling information, at the data quality results. Maybe you want to load your test results because you're testing a process which populates that table. You may want to have that information available in your data catalog. Operational metadata, usage of that information, reference data, related terms. There is a lot more of information that goes beyond just the pure fact that a table exists and it has a certain data type for the columns. So always think very holistically about your data, about everything that is related to it, and what information that you may want to capture would really augment and improve usage of just the pure fact that a table exists. Knowing that a table exists is not enough from the data governance perspective, and you need to make sure that you provide as much context, as much additional details as you can. Now, there are obviously solutions that we offer in this space, both for the data lineage harvesting perspective, as well as from additional metadata loading perspective. But the key message here is to always think about what is it that you want to capture, and then think about what are the right tools that will help you to provide this information and centralize it in the data catalog. Having data quality information which is somewhere else in an unconnected tool that a subset of people have access to is really pretty much useless. A lot of the information that you have in all those other places will not provide you with real value unless you centralize it in a single place, so that anyone who is looking for information about this, let's say, customer table, can find all this information in a single place with a single press of a button. Now, glossary and the basic data catalog information is obviously the basics for building a successful data catalog. However, when working with various customers, we very often find some small treasures that really provide incredible value for those organizations when used properly. And what I mean here by treasures is the islands of metadata with information that is maintained and stored by various teams and provides information about business processes, IT assets, analytical models, various types of objects, various types of concepts that are being maintained in the organization and are being registered, are being tracked, are being developed over time, but are not necessarily made public to anyone who could actually benefit from this information. And in many cases, people use existing applications or spreadsheets or wiki pages to store that information. And not all of that information really should be modeled as a business term, because you could think, oh, if I have any information, I can put everything as a business term to my catalog, it will be available to everyone. Can you do that? Yes, of course you can. Does it really make sense? No, because in many cases, the information that you have will be way more rich than something that you would want to represent as a business term. If you are, let's say, storing information about applications and technologies and assets which are using those, you may want to have this as first-class citizens in your data catalog, connected to each other, annotated with business terms, connected to the data lineage objects. Every modern data catalog allows you to use various modeling techniques to represent information in a way more rich fashion than by just using technical metadata for tables and files and processes and business terms. You can do way more, and you need to always think about what are these useful pieces of information. And trust me, every organization has hundreds of them that you can attach to, that you can understand and load into your data catalog and expose them, because that information becomes way more precious. It becomes way more useful and valuable and actionable when it is actually available for people. And the easiest way to make it available to the people is to load them to your data catalog. Now, in the same time, this is also the easiest way to increase value of your data catalog and make sure that your implementation is successful, because you are gathering information and making it available to people. So they will come for more, and your data catalog, your data governance project will provide even more value for the organization. Again, obviously, there are solutions that we offer in this space to automate the process of loading such information. But the key thing is to make sure that you think about identifying that information. Then you can load it. But the key thing is to make sure that you actually know what are those treasure islands of metadata that you can load into the system. The next aspect is very important and very often forgotten is that it is not enough to gather information and create those beautiful systems that store it and process it. you always need to make sure that that information that you have captured actually is consumed by people, and that you always think about people first when you're building your data catalog. Otherwise, you may end up with a system which stores a lot of useful information that no one actually can effectively use, because it is so difficult, it's so complex to work with this information. The critical aspect is to always start working with people actually before you are starting your data governance project. There are people who are responsible in your organizations for security, for management of systems, and you need to make sure that you work with them before you start sourcing information from the systems that they manage, from the systems that they are protecting as part of their daily jobs. If you do not establish a relationship with them, if you do not start by putting them first in the process, you will end up with a situation where you will spend months opening access tickets and then having them rejected several times until you actually clarify what do you want to achieve. This is very important because data governance projects typically require slightly different type of access than those people are very often used to. You're not looking at data, you're looking at metadata more holistically. You need access to all schemas, not just one schema. So it will take time for those people to develop processes which are needed to support this type of access. Now, if you don't start by working with them and explaining to them what do you want to achieve, how, why, and how they will benefit from what you're doing, you will not be successful, and you will spend a lot of time not really solving the real problems, but trying to repeat the same thing over and over again. Now, assuming that you have convinced all of them and you start gathering all this information to the system, the key element that is very often forgotten is usability of the information that you have captured and represented in your data catalog. And you could think that, oh, I bought a data catalog. So those guys who invented that catalog, who built it for me, they did all the research, they did all the analysis about how to build an effective data catalog. And yes, of course, they did. However, a lot of the end user usability is impacted not only by how the data catalog has been designed, but also by how you have decided to make use of it. When you are importing your metadata, you need to make sure that you model it, you represent it, you configure it in a way which promotes usability. Too often, those systems are designed by highly advanced power users for highly advanced power users. And that's not necessarily right choice if your user base consists of few highly advanced power users and thousands of regular users who want to quickly, easily find the basic information. So you need to make sure that you think about what are your user groups, how do you categorize them, how do you represent the information in the system to improve usability as much as possible. When loading that information, you obviously want to connect it all together. So when you're loading your database tables, your data lineage information, your business terms, your IT assets, your application catalogs, always think about if there are two types of information that really can be connected together through meaningful relationships. Because the information that you gather in your data catalog is only as valuable as it is discoverable and connected to each other. If you do not create these connections, if you do not represent those connections in the system in a way which allows your users to easily navigate in a wiki-like style through these objects because they are connected together through relationships, you will not really deliver as much value as you potentially could. Now, very important aspect that you also need to keep in mind is that gathering all this information and making it available for people for clicking and analyzing and looking at it is just part of the story, because you're very quickly gathering so much information that in order to consume this information, you need more than just looking at those pieces of data. You actually want to report on them. You want to analyze them. You want to slice and dice it. Now, while it is fairly easy to report on information about all your columns, all your attributes, all your business terms, it is not that easy to report, analyze, and slice and dice the graph information of your data lineage flow. And the holy grail of having effective data catalog is when you are able to effectively combine the technical information of your data lineage, how it is connected to each other, with all the auxiliary business and other metadata that is attached to those objects. In order to effectively work with them, you need to make sure that you have tools which can utilize not just relational tabular information of various types of objects, but also the data lineage which connects them to each other, the various types of relationships that connect them to each other. So you need to think if you need that type of analytics, and most likely the answer will be yes. You will need analytics of data lineage. You will need ability to compare data lineage today with data lineage 3 months ago. All those solutions, all those requirements may not be satisfied by your data catalog out of the box. Now, we do offer solutions which you can put on top of your data catalog in order to have historical lineage comparison, to understand how does data lineage today differs from the data lineage 3 months ago. How does data flow through a complex system that is not easy to visualize in the data catalog itself? But again, the key thing is to identify your requirements. And only when you really go through reporting and analytics requirements of what do you want to achieve, then you can identify what are the various tools that you can use in order to satisfy those requirements. As I was saying before, you always need to do that by identifying types of users and making sure that whatever you're designing, data lineage reporting, data modeling for your business terms, all the various aspects we've been talking about, you always do this having end users in mind and having the types of those users and importance of those scenarios that they have in your mind to design for those users that this should be designed for, and without not forgetting about some types of users which may not be obvious if you just have systems designed by advanced users for the advanced users. When going through this process, very often you will use artificial intelligence, and pretty much any catalog today has sometimes more, sometimes less data analytics that is based on artificial intelligence. What we often see is that our customers, when trying to use that, they make one of the two mistakes. They either try to use it too much by initially fully trusting that solution and then realizing a bit too late that maybe what was done by the machine is not necessarily what should be done, or not using it at all and therefore not gaining the efficiency gains that you can actually get by properly applying artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence does not solve all problems of, let's say, business term assignment through technical assets, but it can be helpful and it can be effective in providing efficiency in those processes when used properly. So I always advise our customers to make sure that they understand where it applies and where it can actually help versus where it doesn't really apply and will not really provide that much value as some of the marketing hype can be telling. Now, to put it all together, what we've been talking about is a concept of building a data catalog that is very effective because it looks at all those different aspects to build kind of data catalog on steroids. We've been talking about cataloging your data, so putting together your profiling information, quality, usage, as rich information as you can to make sure that your data catalog goes across all the different types of information that makes sense for your users. We've been talking about data lineage, automated, manual, operational. Again, you want to very carefully design your data lineage strategy to effectively build your data flows that you will be able to populate data catalog and thus build your end-to-end data lineage, either for regulatory requirements or for daily work efficiencies. We've been also talking about treasure islands, and again, every time we work with our customers, I'm always surprised about how much useful information there is buried in those department wikis, department shared drives with Excels, SharePoints, all those places where the information is stored, maintained by small groups of people without necessarily exposing that information to everyone else in the organization that could make use of it. Very often the same information is maintained by different teams. Sometimes it's similar, sometimes not. But in every data catalog implementation, I always try to find my treasure islands that I can discover, where I can find all these treasures in form of useful, actionable information, actionable data that I can load to my data catalog and make it more rich, more actionable, more usable. When looking at Business Glossary, you can buy it, you can build it from scratch, but always make sure that you think through this process, that you find and import all the pieces which exist, because there is always glossary that you can find and make use of. Now, you may need to reconcile it, to consolidate it from different departments, but there is always something to work with. And I never believe when people tell me that there is no existing glossary. There is. The person you're talking to may not be aware of it, but there is always information that can be used to kick off your business glossary implementation. Finally, consumption. Having great information is cool, but having information actually can be effectively used through reporting, analytics, through connecting it all together so it can be traversed is the critical element to make all of this other work that we've been talking about effective and useful, and to deliver their value and maximize the investment, maximize the return on the investment that you made in your data catalog. So thank you for your time today. We'll answer as many questions as we will be able to answer in the remaining time. All the questions that have been asked either in the registration form or during the webinar will be saved, and we will respond to you over email in the coming days. We've been also talking about data lineage assessment that we will be more than happy to do for you. Please email David Lindblom with your contact information, and we'll be more than happy to set up a virtual process where we will gather information from you. We'll try to advise you as much as we can to see how you can improve your data lineage and improve your data catalog results. This scorecard, this assessment will be in about a week from now. Thank you very much. Dan, can you maybe look at the questions, and I think you will pick some interesting ones that we can answer right now, as long as we still have some time.
Absolutely, David, and thank you for your insights. I'm sure the audience has taken a lot away from this session of a lot of great ideas. The first question we have is, how do you provide data lineage for parameterized jobs with dynamic SQL?
Okay, so this actually binds to what I was talking about before. When you are building your data lineage, you need to make sure that the solution you will be working with will be robust enough to go beyond simple cases of source to target metadata, that you will be able to actually analyze stored procedures, which call other stored procedures, passing parameters, metadata-driven frameworks, dynamic SQL that is generated by the flows. When you are talking about large-scale data lineage analytics and harvesting of data lineage from complex parameterized dynamic code, there is only one solution to that, which is to pick the right tool for harvesting data lineage. If you will pick a tool which is not capable of looking at parameterization, you will not be able to do it effectively. In many cases, in addition to the code itself, you may need to look at auxiliary information. Very often, for example, people are using stored procedures to process data, and the information about the parameters which are used by those procedures is not available in the database itself. It will be very often buried either in the ETL tools, which are calling those procedures, or quite often in the schedulers. So you always need to think holistically and go beyond just what you are processing. Think about what is it that is really calling it, and try to look for the missing information that your tool for data lineage harvesting may need in the places which are calling this particular solution. What's the next question?
Thank you. So the next question is what does it take to migrate from one data catalog to another?
Okay, that's actually a very good question. And we do see, especially over the last year or so, increasing in number of questions about, well, what do you do in order to move from one data catalog to another? And there is a lot of misunderstanding around that space. One of the most common ones is that what people try to do is to export content from one glossary and import it into the other one. Now, this does not work, because if you have content that has been automatically loaded into one tool and you copy that content to your other tool, you will not be able to refresh that ever. What you really need to migrate from one glossary, from one catalog to another, and to the other one, you really need to look at the import configurations and import processes. And you really want to migrate over from one tool to another the import processes rather than the content itself. If you do it this way and you look at the import configurations, import processes, you migrate those one by one, and then you only migrate content for that content that has been developed in the tool, then you will be able to successfully migrate your data catalog. Any more questions? I think we're slightly over time, but maybe we can do one more.
Sure. David, how different is data lineage and metadata management for cloud systems versus on-premise systems?
So that's actually a very interesting question, because the answer is it is not different at all. Very often customers nowadays, when talking about AWS and Google, all those different cloud providers, they're trying to come up with a strategy to extract metadata from those systems. The answer is there is no difference. And if you look at your data catalogs, as well as if you look at your data lineage harvesting tools, when they are properly designed, they are really cloud agnostic. And for a typical data catalog or a lineage harvesting tool, it does not matter if the source of the metadata or the tool itself runs on-premise or in cloud. What you need to always make sure is that you have a right set of data lineage extractors to extract all of the source technologies. But what matters is the source technology itself, rather than if it is running on the cloud or on-premise. A database or a procedure or a piece of ETL tool will provide you the same information and will be scanned the same way, regardless if you're doing this on-premise or in the cloud. Okay, I think we need to wrap it up a bit with this question. We are aware that there was a lot of questions that we did not answer during that time, but as I said before, we will come back to every one of you and answer those questions over email over the coming days. Just give us a bit of time, because there's quite a lot of them, so it will take us a few days to go through all of them and provide the answers. Thank you very much for your time today. Dan, do you want to add anything?
No, David, thank you for your insights and for sharing your experiences with everybody. And we appreciate everyone's time today. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.